to lay on the table a copy each of the following papers: the Economic Survey 24-25 Statistical Appendix,
The budget fever has gripped India. Tomorrow is the first full budget of Modi 3.0, and it's a big one. We've got a protectionist Trump in the White House, an economic slowdown at home, and a middle class clamoring for tax cuts. But that's all for tomorrow. Today was about the economic survey. It's basically a document prepared by the Finance Ministry, sort of like a report card. It looks at your strengths, your weaknesses, your targets, and your achievements. Today, the 2025 Economic Survey was tabled in India's Parliament. We are going to break it down for you with the top 10 highlights. Number 1, GDP projections and targets. Growth in the next fiscal year is expected to be between 6.3 and 6.8%. That's from April 2025 to March 2026. Let's put that number in context. We will likely end this fiscal year at 6.4%. The year before was 8.2%. The next year will be 6.3 to 6.8%. Is that enough for our current target? The answer is no. The government wants to turn India into a developed country by 2047. And for that, growth must be 8%. You need 8% growth for a decade or two. That's what the Economic Survey says. Highlight number 2, the status of inflation. Prices are expected to cool in this quarter, especially with the seasonal easing of vegetable prices. Plus, the new harvests will reach the market soon. So, overall, inflation is projected to fall. Highlight number 3, the job market. This year's economic survey paints a positive picture. It says unemployment has consistently fallen in India from 6% in 2017-18 to 3.2% in the last fiscal year. But the job is not done yet. India must create 7.85 million non-farm jobs every year. Almost 8 million jobs. Only then can we satisfy this growing population. Highlight number 4 is infrastructure. The government has made big bets on infra projects like roads, tunnels and ports, but the survey says the government alone cannot keep it up. The private sector needs to up its game. Let me quote from what it says. India needs a continued step up of infrastructure investment over the next 2 decades to sustain a high rate of growth. Quite clearly, public sector efforts cannot fully meet these requirements. Private participation should accelerate in many critical infrastructure sectors in many ways. Which brings us to highlight number 5, deregulation and reforms. This talks about removing unnecessary government rules, about unleashing the private sector. Again, let me quote from what the survey says. Getting out of the way and allowing businesses to focus on their core mission is a significant contribution that governments around the country can make to foster innovation and enhance competitiveness. That's a very clear message to the government. Get out of the way. Let the private sector do its thing. Highlight number 6 is artificial intelligence. There's a big chapter dedicated to AI, and it strikes a mixed note. The survey admits that AI's impact on India's labor market will be magnified, mainly because our per capita income is low, and a lot of our jobs are low-skilled. So what is the solution? To transition towards medium or high-skilled jobs, those that will not be replaced by AI. If that happens, we could reap a number of benefits. So the economic survey's advice is clear: upskill to protect our job market from artificial intelligence. Highlight number 7 is wages and working hours. The survey says Indian corporate profits are at a 15-year high, but wages have lagged. They want this imbalance corrected. The survey gives the example of Japan after the Second World War, how their companies shared profits with workers. This balance is crucial to rapid growth. Equally important is working hours. A lot of industry titans have weighed in on this. They have called for 90 and 70 hours per week. But the Economic Survey of India has hit back. It says 60 hours is the ideal working time. Spending too much time at your desk can harm your mental health. It's a timely clarification by the government. Next is highlight number 8, a war on junk food. The survey has proposed a higher tax on ultra-processed junk food or food items, sort of like a health tax. This would make things like fries or ice creams more expensive. The idea is to discourage their consumption. It also wants strict rules on labeling. Right now, a lot of ultra-processed foods are mislabeled. I'll give you some examples. Sugar-packed cereals are often labeled as healthy breakfast. Even children's drinks are labeled as healthy, though most of them are packed with sugar. The goal is to crack down on that, to make sure that people know what they are eating. Now we come to the last two highlights. Both of these cover India's external challenges. Highlight number 9 is China. Last year's economic survey was optimistic on China. It called for more Chinese investments in India. But this time, it's more of a warning. The survey notes that India is dependent on China for key products like solar panels, electric vehicles, and critical minerals. It also flags China's manufacturing prowess. They make up around 45% of global manufacturing. That is more than the US and its allies put together. So the economic survey's message is clear. India needs to diversify its options. Either produce at home or find more sellers elsewhere. Which brings us to the final highlight. A word on Donald Trump's tariffs and rising protectionism.
First, we have a list of...
Again, it calls for a mixed response. The survey suggests that tariffs should be rationalized, but it also reaffirms the importance of tariffs. It cites the example of the US and Britain in the last centuries. The survey says the US did not catch up with free trade or open markets. They caught up using tariffs. So India should also use this tool, but use it wisely. Those are the big highlights from India's economic survey this year. The biggest takeaway is probably reforms. Reduce the roadblocks, ease the business rules, and unleash the private sector. And make sure you tune into Firstpost for our special budget coverage tomorrow. We'll be tracking the finance minister's speech in the morning, the key announcements, the big policy changes, and the major reactions. Also, don't miss the special budget edition of Vantage at 9 p.m. tomorrow.